The night sky above Earth was calm, but space was never truly silent. Hidden in the darkness, faint whispers of distant stars and forgotten echoes of dying worlds always traveled. Most of the time, no one noticed. But on one ordinary evening, deep inside an old observatory in the mountains, something unusual was caught. A receiver, rusting and almost forgotten, picked up a strange pattern. At first, it sounded like static, broken waves of noise. But then it grew clearer. A trembling voice, distorted by distance and fear, reached the ears of a lonely technician. He leaned closer, unsure if his tired mind was playing tricks. But no, this was real, it was not human. The voice was cracked, filled with terror. Strange tones, heavy breaths, and a language that twisted the air in ways no human tongue could form. The technician's heart pounded as he hit record. He did not understand the words at first, but the emotion inside them was clear. Desperation. Something was begging for help. Within hours, scientists across the world were listening. The message was translated piece by broken piece until the meaning became undeniable. The voice cried, "They are coming! Entire worlds burn. We cannot stop them, please. Anyone who can hear this? Help us." The message ended with coordinates, a point in the galaxy so far from Earth that no ship had ever dared to reach it, and then silence. For a long moment, no one spoke. The room was filled only with the hum of machines and the weight of realization. Humanity was not alone. It was the question asked by countless generations, whispered by children looking at the night sky, argued by scientists and dreamers alike. Are we the only ones? That night the answer arrived. But it was not what people had hoped for. It was not friendship. It was not joy. It was fear. The distress signal spread fast. News outlets broadcast it. Governments panicked. Billions watched the translated words replay again and again. They are coming. Worlds burn, please. Help. In homes and streets, people whispered. Some felt wonder. Aliens were real. Others felt dread. If they were advanced enough to send signals across galaxies, then what had hunted them must be even worse. But one thing was the same for all. The voice sounded afraid. And fear was something humanity understood too well. Leaders gathered in secret rooms debating. Some argued this was not Earth's problem. Humanity had its own struggles, its own wounds. Why risk lives for strangers? Others claimed it was a trap, that the coordinates were bait for an invasion. But many remembered history. They remembered when cries for help had gone unanswered on Earth itself. They remembered when the world had looked away as cities burned, as innocents suffered. Those scars were old but not forgotten, and so the question was asked, do we turn away, or do we answer? The debate stretched through the night. Scientists studied the signal, searching for lies but finding only truth. The voice was not faked. The fear was not staged. Whoever they were real and they were dying. Finally, a decision was made. Earth would not remain silent. Humanity would answer. But the way humanity answered would not be with soft words or cautious steps. No. Humanity had been shaped by fire, by wars, by survival against impossible odds. They knew what it meant to fight predators, to resist extinction, to stand when all others had fallen. If they went, they would not go unprepared. The technicians replayed the message one final time that night. The trembling alien voice begged once more for help, fading into static. And as the sound disappeared into silence, a quiet promise settled into the hearts of all who heard it. Earth had heard the call. And somewhere in the dark, the universe would soon learn what it meant when humanity answered. The signal shook the world. Every news channel replayed it. Every device echoed with the alien voice begging for help. Children sat wide-eyed, listening to words they did not understand but emotions they could feel. Adults whispered in fear. Some prayed, some denied, and some waited for answers that would not come easily. Inside the great chamber of the United Earth Council, the leaders of nations sat around a long curved table. Screens floated above them, displaying the broken translation of the alien message. They are coming. Entire worlds burn, please, help us. Silence hung in the room. No one wanted to speak first. Finally, an elder statesman broke it. His voice was heavy. We cannot risk it. If we send our fleet, if we send our soldiers, we might never see them return. Earth must be protected. Our people must come first, others nodded. Fear made their words strong. "This is not our fight," one added. "Why sacrifice ourselves for a species we do not know? What if this is a trick? What if we walk into a trap?" But not everyone agreed. A younger leader, her eyes sharp with fire, leaned forward. "And if it is not a trap? If it is real? Then entire civilizations are dying while we argue. Is this who we are? A species that looks away when others suffer?" The room stirred. Some frowned, others shifted uncomfortably. Memories of Earth's history hung in the air like ghosts. Humanity had once turned its back on suffering before, and the scars of those mistakes still bled in the pages of history. Another voice rose, trembling but firm. "They are afraid." You heard it. That was not the sound of a conqueror. That was a plea. And if they can send such a message, it means their destroyers are even greater. What happens when those destroyers turn their eyes toward us? The question cut through the silence like a blade. One by one, more voices joined. Some demanded caution. Others demanded action. The chamber filled with heated words, fear, anger, hope, doubt. It was more than strategy. It was about what kind of species humanity would choose to be. In the back of the room, a historian whispered to himself, words later remembered by all. Empires fall not only by the sword, but by silence. The debate raged for hours. Outside, the world waited. Billions tuned into updates, holding their breath. Soldiers sat in their barracks, wondering if they would soon be called. Families prayed their sons and daughters would not be taken. Yet under the fear, a strange pride began to grow. For the first time, humanity stood united against a choice that was larger than Earth itself. Near dawn, the council reached its decision. A vote was cast. A choice was made. The results glowed across the chamber's screen. Earth would answer the distress signal, but not with hesitation, not with timid whispers. Humanity had always been a species of survivors, born from struggle, hardened by endless conflict. They had risen from caves to the stars, carrying with them the memory of fire and blood. If they went, they would go with all the strength they had built across centuries. The council did not speak of peace. They did not speak of mercy. They spoke of preparation. Warships that had slept in shipyards would awaken. Soldiers who had trained for battles that never came would march, and humanity would bring something the galaxy had never seen before. The fury of a death-world species united in purpose. As the council dismissed, the younger leader who had spoken boldly earlier stood by the window. She looked up at the night sky, the stars glowing faintly above the city. Somewhere out there, far beyond the reach of her eyes, someone was waiting for help. Someone who believed no one was listening. She whispered softly, almost like a vow, "You are not alone. Not anymore." And in that moment, humanity's path was sealed. They would answer the call, and the universe, still unaware, would soon feel the weight of that decision. The decision was made, and Earth would answer. But words alone were not enough. Humanity's promise had to be carried across the stars, and only steel and courage could do that. In hidden valleys, buried deep under mountains, and in dry deserts where no one lived, shipyards awakened. They had slept for decades waiting for a moment like this. Massive hangar doors, sealed with rust and dust, groaned open as dawn light touched them for the first time in years. Inside, shadows gave way to giants of metal. Warships. Their hulls gleamed with armor thick enough to withstand the fury of suns. Cannons, long and silent, stood ready to roar again. These ships had been built in caution, perhaps even in fear when humanity first learned that they might not be alone. But no one had expected to use them so soon. Now their time had come. Engineers worked day and night, sparks flying as systems came alive. The silence of the shipyards broke into thunder as reactors hummed, weapons charged, and massive engines rumbled awake. What was once a sleeping relic became a heartbeat of war. The first to board were the soldiers. They came in silence. No celebrations, no music. They carried their gear, their weapons, and something more powerful, resolve. Every step they took echoed with the weight of choice. They were not fighting for land or riches. They were going for something far greater, a promise to answer a call for help. In barracks, commanders stood before their troops. Their words were simple, but they burned with truth. We are not going to conquer. We are not going to dominate. We are going because someone cried for help. And when humanity hears a cry, we do not turn away. We stand, we fight, we endure. That is who we are. The soldiers nodded. Some clenched their fists. Some whispered quiet prayers. Others thought of their families, of faces they might never see again. But none turned back. Above Earth, the sky soon filled with shapes never seen before by common eyes. Warships rose from oceans, from deserts, from hidden bases. They broke through clouds like steel mountains rising into the heavens. Cities stopped to watch. Children pointed upward. The old wept, remembering wars of long ago. Billions of eyes lifted to the skies, and with every ship that rose, hope and fear grew together. The largest ship of them all was the flagship. She was called Leviathan, a colossal carrier. Her hull stretched like a continent, bristling with cannons and railguns, enough to fight entire fleets alone. She was more than a ship. She was a symbol. A statement that humanity would not whisper into the void but roar. In control rooms, officers stared at star maps. The coordinates from the alien distress call burned like a beacon. It was far, farther than any Terran fleet had gone before. But it was reachable, and they would reach it. As the fleet prepared to depart, the world held its breath. Families gathered around screens watching the broadcasts. Old veterans stood at attention in their homes, saluting the ships they could not join. Children pressed hands to glass windows, whispering promises to the stars. There were no speeches from leaders. None were needed. The act itself was the message. Humanity had chosen not to hide. And when the order finally came, a single command carried across every ship, every soldier. Every soul aboard. Terran fleet, launch. Engines flared like newborn suns. One by one, the ships broke Earth's orbit. Thousands of tons of steel pierced the darkness, their lights burning bright against the endless night. The planet watched them go, their hearts heavy yet proud. They did not know if the fleet would return. They did not know what waited in the darkness. But they knew one thing. Humanity had answered. Somewhere in the void, far beyond sight, someone had cried out for help. And now from Earth the answer was rising like a storm of fire. The Terran fleet cut through the black sea of space, a storm of steel and light. For weeks they traveled, crossing voids that no human had ever dared to go. Every soldier aboard felt the weight of the journey. They looked at the stars through narrow windows, and wondered if those lights had already burned into ashes under the enemy's fire. When they reached the coordinates from the distress signal, silence greeted them. The system ahead looked like a grave. Planets once alive now floated as ruins. Their surfaces were scorched black, their atmospheres ripped away. Space stations hung broken, drifting in pieces. Debris floated in endless orbits, remnants of ships that had tried to fight and failed. The soldiers watched in horror. Even from the safety of their armored hulls, they could feel the despair left behind. And then at the edge of the system, shadows stirred. The enemy. Their ships were massive, sharp and dark like knives cutting across the stars. They moved with confidence, their numbers overwhelming. Hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. A wall of steel and malice. The enemy's comms crackled through the Terran channels. Their voices were mocking, cruel. Another prey arrives. Another weak race playing with fire. Turn back, apes of Earth, this is not your fight. Leave or burn as the rest have burned. On the bridges of Terran ships, commanders stood silent. They listened to the threat, but their faces did not change. They had heard such arrogance before, on their own world, in their own history. Humanity knew what predators sounded like, and they knew the only answer predators respected. The order was given. No speeches, no hesitation. Fire. The first Terran salvo lit the darkness. Railguns thundered, launching slugs at near light speed. Missiles streaked from cruisers, glowing trails of fury behind them. The void came alive with fire. The enemy laughed at first. They thought themselves untouchable. But then their laughter turned to screams. Terran rounds tore through their shields, punching holes in their armor. Entire enemy ships split apart, breaking like fragile glass under the fury of Earth's guns. For the first time, the predators hesitated. But hesitation did not stop them. They regrouped and charged, swarming the Terran fleet like a tide of blades. Their weapons flashed, slamming against human shields, rocking entire cruisers with each hit. Smaller Terran ships vanished in fireballs. Lives were lost in seconds, but no one retreated. Inside the chaos, boarding pods launched. Jagged enemy capsules slammed into Terran hulls, cutting their way inside. Aliens stormed the corridors, snarling and shrieking, their bodies armored, their claws sharp. But they met humans who had been born on a death world. Humans who had survived jungles, deserts, freezing wastes, and wars that had nearly ended their species. In the narrow halls of steel, Humans fought with a fury the galaxy had never seen. Bullets tore through invaders, knives flashed, and even bare fists broke bones. Soldiers who fell still fought until their last breath. To the predators, it was madness. To humans, it was survival. On the flagship Leviathan, Captain Arya Vance stood tall as the enemy fleet closed in. Her eyes burned with determination. She knew the odds. They were outnumbered, perhaps doomed. But she also knew this. Humanity had not come to kneel. "Hold the line," she commanded, her voice steady. "Show them what it means to call for Earth." And so the first encounter raged on. The black void filled with fire, screams, and the clash of steel. The predators had expected another victim, another easy conquest. But what they found was different. What they found was a species that had endured its own nightmares and learned to fight back with everything it had. The first encounter had begun, and for the first time, the enemy understood. Humanity was not prey. The first clash had been brutal, but it was only the beginning. Now the Terran fleet stood face to face with the vast empire of predators. All around them, stars flickered against the black void, as if the universe itself was watching in silence. The enemy came in waves. Their ships were countless, dark silhouettes moving like a storm across the system. For every human warship, 10 alien vessels bore down. Their commanders believed the battle already won. To them, numbers were enough. To them, humanity was just another weak species about to vanish. But numbers had never frightened humans. The Terran fleet tightened formation. Leviathan stood at the center like a mountain of steel, her guns glowing with restrained fury. Smaller cruisers flanked her, weaving patterns of fire, while destroyers surged forward, tearing holes in the enemy's charge. The void exploded with light. Railgun slugs, invisible until they struck, ripped through alien armor. Missiles screamed as they launched, turning into fiery blossoms across the black. Enemy ships shattered one after another, but still more came. Inside the Terran ships, soldiers fought their own battles. Boarding pods continued to slam into hulls, spilling alien warriors into the narrow corridors. Claws and plasma blades met bullets and steel. Blood stained the walls, both alien and human. Yet even when surrounded, the Terran soldiers refused to fall quietly. They fought on, every scream turning into a roar of defiance. One Marine squad, trapped on a burning deck, refused to retreat. Their commander, bleeding but unbroken, shouted over the fire and chaos, "If they want to take this ship, they'll have to climb over our corpses." His words became a rallying cry, and though most of them fell, the aliens never passed that deck alive. On the bridge of Leviathan, Captain Arya Vance gave her orders with unshaken calm. Focus fire on their carriers. Break their command. Her crew obeyed instantly. The flagship's cannons roared, each blast like thunder rolling across the stars. One enemy capital ship, proud and mighty, cracked in half under Leviathan's fury, spilling fire into the void. But humanity paid in blood. Smaller frigates were torn apart, their wreckage scattering across the battlefield. Names of the fallen scrolled across command screens, crews who had given everything in those burning seconds. Yet no one faltered. Every loss only sharpened the Terran resolve. The predators began to notice something they had never seen before. Their enemies, the humans, did not retreat. They did not break, even when outnumbered, even when death clawed at them from all sides. If one ship fell, another held the line. If one soldier was struck down, another rose to take his place. This was not a species that surrendered. A commander from the enemy fleet sneered in disbelief as his forces took heavy losses. "They fight like mad beasts," he spat. But deep in his chest, he felt something he had not felt in centuries: fear. For humanity was not just fighting to win. They were fighting to prove to the galaxy that when Earth answered a call for help, it would not be with empty words or fragile promises. It would be with fire, hours stretched into what felt like eternity. The stars became battlefields glowing with explosions. Wreckage drifted everywhere, ships torn apart, escape pods burning, lives extinguished in silence, and still, the Terran fleet fought on. Every shot, every strike, every sacrifice carved a truth into the void. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was a storm, and storms did not beg for survival. They roared, they destroyed, and they endured. As the battle raged on, one thing became clear to both sides. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a message, and the message was written in fire across the stars. The battle stretched on without mercy. Hours passed, but the stars remained on fire. The predators had expected an easy slaughter, but instead they found themselves bleeding. Their fleets, once feared across half the galaxy, were breaking against the fury of Earth. Terran ships burned too. Entire squadrons were gone, reduced to drifting wrecks. Thousands of soldiers had already fallen. Yet the humans did not surrender. Even when their shields cracked and their hulls split, their guns kept firing. Even when flames swallowed their decks, their soldiers kept fighting hand to hand, refusing to give ground. The predators could not understand it. Every other race they had conquered had begged for mercy when defeat was certain. But humans grew more dangerous the closer they came to death. They fought as if pain only sharpened them, as if loss only fueled them. In the middle of the storm, the flagship Leviathan moved like a beast of legend. Her engines glowed brighter than suns, her cannons never silent. Enemy ships focused all fire on her, but she endured. Every hit that struck her armor was answered with a strike 10 times stronger. On her bridge, Captain Arya Vance stood calm. Smoke filled the air. Sparks rained from damaged consoles, but her voice never wavered. Target their command vessel. Break their spine, the order went out. Terran destroyers cut a path through enemy lines, sacrificing themselves so Leviathan could fire. Her massive railgun charged, its core glowing with energy. The crew held their breath. Then the shot came. A beam of destruction tore across the void and slammed into the enemy's flagship. The alien ship's shields shattered. Its hull split open like paper. In moments, the Predator command vessel was gone, consumed by fire. The enemy fleet faltered. Without command, their formation broke. Confusion spread. Their arrogance turned to panic. For the first time, their empire felt something they had not known in centuries. Doubt. Terran ships pressed forward. Soldiers pushed harder inside the boarding battles. Rooms once filled with alien roars now fell silent one after another as humans cleared them. Marines with broken bones still crawled forward, pulling grenades with their teeth. Pilots whose ships were crippled rammed themselves into enemy vessels, turning their final moments into weapons. The tide was turning. Across the battlefield, the predators sent frantic messages to each other. Some called for retreat, others screamed for reinforcements. But deep down they knew the truth. The Terran fleet was not just fighting for survival. They were fighting with a fire no empire could match. On Earth, billions watched the live feeds. Families sat huddled together, eyes wet with tears. They saw their ships burning, their soldiers falling. But they also saw something greater. Victory being carved out of impossible odds. They whispered prayers, cheers, and vows. The whole planet had become one beating heart, pushing their warriors forward. Back on Leviathan, the crew cheered as enemy ships exploded in bright bursts of light. But Captain Vance did not smile. She knew the battle was not over yet. Do not relent, she commanded. Drive them back. Make sure they never return. Her words carried beyond her ship, through every channel, into every soldier's ears. And with renewed strength, humanity surged forward. The predators began to retreat. First slowly, then desperately. Their empire had never faced such resistance. They could not understand how a species so young, so new to the stars, could stand against them. But they understood one thing clearly now. Earth was not a world to be crossed. The Terran fleet advanced, and the predators fled. What had begun as a desperate cry for help had turned into something the galaxy would never forget. The predators thought they were hunters, but against humanity, they had become the hunted. The tide had turned, and the storm of Earth was only just beginning. The predators fled, but humanity did not stop. The Terran fleet, scarred and burning, pressed forward like wolves chasing prey. The signal that had once cried for help still echoed in their hearts. The ruined worlds, the silenced voices, the ashes of civilizations, all demanded justice. And humanity would not rest until it was given. One by one, enemy fleets tried to regroup. Each time they were crushed. Terran warships tore through their defenses, Leviathan leading like a blade of vengeance. Entire armadas, once proud and feared, became fields of wreckage drifting in the cold. The predator's arrogance was gone, replaced only by panic and screams for retreat. But retreat was not enough. Humanity remembered the burned planets they had seen, the shattered stations, the billions who had cried and never been answered. Mercy had no place here. For every innocent world that had been destroyed, A predator world now burned. The Terran fleet descended on enemy colonies with fury. Cities that had once launched conquests now collapsed under orbital fire. Weapons meant to enslave now turned silent in ruins. The predators begged across the channels, their voices trembling. Stop. Please. We yield. But humanity did not yield. On the bridge of Leviathan, Captain Aria Vance listened to those pleas. Her eyes were cold, her jaw tight. She thought of the first signal, the broken voice that had begged for help. That voice had not been answered with mercy. It had been answered with fire and death. And so she gave the order, her voice quiet but final. Erase them. The sky rained with destruction. Terran cannons spoke in thunder, and the Predator's empire fell apart piece by piece. Their strongholds, their fleets, their hidden fortresses, none survived. Humanity became the storm that would not stop until nothing was left. Across the galaxy, other civilizations watched in awe and terror. They had seen empires rise and fall before, but never like this. Never had a young species struck so fast, so hard with such fury. To some, humanity became a savior. To others, a warning. But to all, they became unforgettable. Inside the Terran fleet, soldiers mourned their dead even as they fought on. Every victory was heavy with loss. Yet none doubted their path. They were not destroyers for conquest. They were destroyers for justice. The Predators had chosen annihilation for others, and now annihilation had found them. Finally, after months of relentless fire, silence returned. The last of the Predator fleets vanished in explosions. Their empire, once stretching across the stars, was gone. What remained were ruins, drifting shadows, and the memory of fear. When the battles ended, the Terran fleet stood scarred but unbroken. Their ships were cracked, their crews exhausted, but their mission was complete. They had answered the call. The galaxy would never forget what followed. A single distress signal had reached Earth, trembling with fear. And in reply, Earth had unleashed total annihilation. On the bridge of Leviathan, Captain Vance stood before the wide windows of her ship. The stars stretched endless before her, quiet once more. She thought of the alien voice that had begged for help. She wondered if anyone had survived, if anyone out there could still hear. She whispered softly, not to her crew, not to her enemies, but to the silence itself. You are safe now. Humanity has heard you. And with that, the fleet turned for home. They were not the same as when they had left. They carried scars, grief, and the weight of what they had done, but they also carried something greater, the knowledge that humanity had shown the universe who they truly were. Not prey. Not weak, not silent. When humanity heard a cry, they did not turn away. They answered, and when they answered, the stars themselves trembled.